This recording is protected by copyright. No part may be reproduced without the prior permission of the University of South Australia.
Good evening. My name is Jim McDowell. I'm the Chancellor of the University of South Australia. I would like to acknowledge that we are on Kaurna land and pay tribute to the Kaurna people, the traditional owners of the land we meet on. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. I'd like to welcome you all here tonight on behalf of the University of South Australia and the Hawke Centre to hear from Bill Muirhead AM, who will take us on a branding journey and discuss what we might consider for the future of South Australia's place in the world. Bill Muirhead has a long and distinguished career in the advertising industry, which began, you probably won't thank me for this, in 1970 with Ogilvy and Mather before he joined Saatchi & Saatchi in the early years of 1972. Bill told me earlier that he initially believed Saatchi & Saatchi were two Japanese gentlemen, but was mistaken. He was subsequently appointed chairman of Saatchi & Saatchi Europe with additional responsibility for the London agency, which at that time was the dominant advertising agency in Britain. In 1994, he moved to New York as chief executive and president of Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising Worldwide. In 1995, he founded M&C Saatchi together with David Kershaw, Maurice Saatchi and Jeremy Sinclair, and he remains an executive director of the company whose philosophy is brutal simplicity of thought. Maurice Saatchi summed up the brutal simplicity of thought in a book he called, you may have guessed, The Brutal Simplicity of Thought and When and Where It Changed the World. You will need, he said, a deep distaste for waffle, vagueness, platitudes and flim-flam. A strong preference to get to the point. This is the kind of attitude Bill Muirhead has brought to his role in London of Agent General for South Australia. He decided his first role must be to rebrand the state of South Australia and found a number of conflicting and confusing issues which needed to be addressed and simplified. He was appointed to the role in April 2007 by Premier Mike Rann, and his appointment was extended by former Premier Jay Weatherill in 2015. And I wouldn't like to bet against him being extended by the incoming Liberal government as well. As Agent General, Bill has overseen a host of initiatives that have significantly boosted South Australia's profile in the UK and more widely in Europe, with many trade and investment benefits to the state. In 2013, Bill became a member in the General Division of the Order of Australia for significant service to the community of South Australia through the promotion of international trade. And yesterday, Bill was awarded an honorary doctorate by the University of South Australia in recognition of his contribution and achievements to the state. At the conclusion of Bill's presentation, he will be joined by Jessica Harmison, ABC News award-winning journalist with more than 15 years' experience in broadcast and digital media, for an in-conversation followed by questions from the audience. But for now, please join me in welcoming Bill Muirhead.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jim. Well, thank you very much for that daunting introduction, Jim. For me, it's a great honour to be here and to receive this doctorate from the university. This is the city where I was born and grew up, and I'm a fifth-generation South Australian on both sides of my family. So, for me, this is really, well, it's always going to be home. Even though I've lived most of my life overseas, I've always thought I was here for some reason, and now I've got the best job in the world because I can come back and represent the state. But I have to confess something. Today, I made a huge sacrifice. I had lunch with Peter Gago, who is the chief winemaker of Penfolds. And of course, coming here, I had to forego what he was offering me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do joined-up speaking tonight. So that wasn't going to happen. But first of all, thank you all for coming. And I hope this isn't my last act as Agent General, but I'm not sure whether there's anyone from the government here, but I am going to say some things which I strongly believe about the state. And I'm going to start with our brand and what is our brand, because it's something that I felt very strongly about at the beginning, but I'm then going to talk to you about something else, which Jim alluded to, which is the importance of simplicity in communications, and it is relevant to what I'm going to say a little bit later on, because I'd like to involve you if I can, and it will involve you turning on your smartphones again, and I'm sure some of you have still got them on and probably tweeting now, but later on you will need them. So, now I'm not a politician, so it's easy for me to say a lot of these things. It's harder to do them, and the politicians are the people who have to do them. But I'm going to suggest 5 simple ideas that would transform our state. But let me start with our brand, because that's the most important thing. And when we here think of South Australia, this is what we see. But this is what the rest of the world sees. Okay? Believe me. I was once asked, and I say this with Chris Holtby here, to brief a delegation going down to southern Australia, and when I turned up to brief the delegation, I was introduced as the Agent General for Southern Australia from Melbourne. So, and I'm not joking, I mean, it was, if the British government didn't know where we were, what hope did we have? So, just let me remind you of where we were back in 2012. It was this. I've actually adapted it slightly. It's not terrible, to be honest, but and it comes from our fine wine, but maybe it is a bit bland. But the thing that I hate the most about this, and I really do dislike this, is the SA abbreviation, because everywhere else in the world outside of Australia, SA is South Africa or Saudi Arabia. So, pardon? So anyway, in London, in our office, if anyone uses that SA moniker, it's a CTE. Do you know what that is? A CTE is a career terminating event. So we don't have that. So in my view, we needed a very simple and consistent brand that would apply to everything we do, and we have it, because this is it. It says where we are. It says we're a gateway into Australia. I think it's clever, but most of all, it's simple. And it may yet be my greatest achievement as Agent General. It's certainly something I'm very proud to have been associated with. How can people do business with you if they don't know where you are? Now, if there's anything scientific about what I do in my advertising job, which is essentially subjective, it's this, that awareness creates a preference which should create a sale, which equals a sale. So my job is about selling South Australia to the world. And these here are the images overseas that define Australia. And as you can see, none of them are ours. Now, I was hoping the Premier might have been here. He's not here, is he? But because I did talk to him the other day about moving our border up so we could take in Uluru, and I thought that would be... He hasn't quite got around to that yet. But these genuinely are images that are powerful images for our country, and none of them are ours. So, arguably, our most famous landmark is this, the Adelaide Oval, which is now the new Adelaide Oval, which I love. It's state-of-the-art. I think it's great. It's happened, I think it's the best thing in my lifetime that's happened here in Adelaide, personally. But it's not the Sydney Opera House, unless you're a cricket tragic, and I don't think there are any more cricket tragics in Australia after the recent events in South Africa, so it probably doesn't apply. Now that's a little bit about branding, but let me just now get straight to the point of simplicity. What I said is we need to do something simple. So I want to talk to you just for a minute about that, about the importance of simplicity. Now, Bertrand Russell, the great British philosopher, he said this. He said, "Thought is great and swift and free, the light of the world and the chief glory of man." But he also said this, "Most people would rather die than think." So why are most people so reluctant to think? Because it's hard. So he said this, he said, "For thoughts to be great and swift and free and the light of the world, you can't be small and slow and limited and dull." So Bertrand Russell talked about the painful necessity of thought. So where do we start? Well, Jim alluded to this, the brutal simplicity of thought. Why brutal? Well, brutal simplicity of thought requires a ruthlessness not normally seen outside the battlefield. It demands that we're very hard on ourselves, not on others, but on our customary thought processes. It's much easier to complicate things than it is to simplify them, believe me. So, removing the bland, we talked a bit about this. So this process involves removing waffle and claptrap, and some words that you use quite well. So there's that. Then why simple? It's easy, because simple messages enter the brain quicker and stay there longer. Now, I want to now show you some work that you've probably never seen before, but you'll never forget. Now, this first one is a poster, and this poster changed Britain in 1979 because it brought Margaret Thatcher and the Conservative Party to power in the UK for 15 years. It emasculated the trade union movement and introduced the world to privatisation, and it was voted the poster of the century. Now, that's a long time ago. Something very current now. This is very recent. It's a poster that didn't run during the recent UK referendum for the Remain side of the Brexit vote. It was scheduled to run, but 2 days before that happened, an MP was brutally murdered in the UK, and obviously it was not appropriate, so there was no campaign for Remain, and Britain voted to leave the EU. Wrongly, in my personal view, because I think Britain should lead the EU, not leave it. That's my view. It's cowardly to run away. Now, it's been a very divisive thing, and families have been split, and all those other things have happened, but we are where we are, and obviously it's an immensely complex argument. But here was a simple message that never appeared, so there was no campaign for Remain. There was a lot of work done for leaving, and I can see the arguments for both sides, but as I said, we are where we are. Now, will you ever forget this poster, which is anti-racism? Something we did a while ago, but I think you'll agree, a very powerful example. And something now that dates me a little bit, because when I was at Saatchi & Saatchi in 1989, the world was watching the Berlin Wall come down, and one of our people came to me with an opportunity, and the opportunity, he said, was for a $10,000 bribe to a couple of East German border guards, we could put the first poster on the east side of the Berlin Wall, right by the Brandenburg Gate. So we had a client who made a paint, which was an outdoor paint, which lasted a long time, and I got our creative guys to do some posters, and they had this great idea, which was, some things last forever, comrades, not your wall. Anyway, the client didn't get spontaneity, and we had to do it instantly, so we did this for the agency, for the company. And this then appeared on every media channel around the world at the time, every single media channel. And we went on to become the biggest advertising agency in the world, not because of this, but as part of it, I think, but it helped. But it just shows that you can be spontaneous if you're quick, and it's very simple, obviously. Now, I also want to say something about simplicity, because when you cut to the essence of anything, you have time to be funny. So I'm going to give you a little commercial break now, and I'm going to show you just 3 TV commercials, which are, 2 are from here, from Australia, and 1 is for an Australian product in the UK. So if we could just show those.
The white stuff from Tip Top with Iron Fibre Plus.
I might just have one sandwich today, thanks, Mum.
One sandwich contains at least 1/3 of the recommended daily iron intake. It's powerful stuff.
Optus approached me and asked me to do an advert telling Australia that they're getting Netflix. I said I'd need like a shed load of cash, like seriously mental money. They went, okay. I said, I don't want to put any effort into it. I want to do it sitting down. They went, okay, can you at least, big up the product a bit? I went, not really. No, I don't know about it. I've never heard of Optus. They said, we're not happy with this as an advert. I went, it's too late. You've paid me, I've spent it. Use this if you want. They use it. They use it.
The Earth is getting hotter. Left unchecked, we face an uncertain future. Europe could become desert. Drinking water may be rationed. We must act now. Write to your MP, voice your concern. Make a donation, your gift counts. Alternatively, say bollocks to it and enjoy the sunshine while you still can.
I don't think that last one would get through the censors these days, but it's a very big, it's not a big selling beer here, but it is a big selling beer in the UK. In fact, it's the biggest selling beer in the UK. So those are three examples of simplicity and the use of humour. But all that is from the past, and I don't want to dwell on the past, I want to go on to the future, because we shouldn't look back. So in our agency, we created a little scientific formula. It's not really, it's as close as you could get to being scientific in a subjective business like advertising. We call it the 3 boxes. And the first box is what we call a cert, and that contains what we described as a simple, universally recognizable truth about a product or brand. The next box is a brand truth, which contains a truth about the product or brand. And if you add those two together, you should get a proposition which would be the catalyst for belief or action, in other words, sales. So the reason I'm doing this is because I want to apply it to us. And the thing that I can do now is just show you how it worked for a very big pharmaceutical company, a global pharmaceutical company called Glaxo Wellcome. And this was done at the time, well, rather like the banks now. They're the kind of public enemy almost. The big pharmaceutical companies make huge amounts of money. But let me just show you how this works for this company, Glaxo Wellcome. So if we can have this, the cert, the simple truth about life is that mankind's greatest enemy is disease. And the brand truth from Glaxo Wellcome is that they spend more money fighting disease than anyone else. So the proposition became mankind's disease's greatest enemy, is Glaxo Wellcome. And I'll just show you a very simple little TV commercial that brings that to life. So if we could play that.
Why have thousands of our scientists, along with universities and hospitals, spent 12 years and over £500 million researching into something which measures 1/10,000th of a millimetre? Because this is the HIV virus that leads to AIDS, which has killed more people than died in the Allied forces in the whole of the First World War. Man has no greater enemy than disease. Disease has no greater enemy than Glaxo Wellcome.
So that's just an example of how that little formula can work to simplify what is obviously a very complex message. Now, I want to talk about South Australia all the way through this, but how could that work for us, for South Australia? So I've had a go, and I've just had a go myself to see if I could make this work for us. And using that same little scientific formula, I've done this. So the cert becomes people love new things, right? And if you add that to a brand truth about us, it's that South Australia does more new things than any other state. And the proposition could then become what I've called New South Australia, which makes them Old South Wales over in Sydney, which I'm sorry if there's anyone from New South Wales here, but you'll all know that doing new things is good, and doing things first is good. I mean, we were the first state, and I'm very proud of this, we were the first state in Australia to give votes to women in 1895. We were the second place in the world to do that. New Zealand beat us by a bit, but I'm very proud of the fact that we did that. More recently, we were the first Australian state to introduce climate change legislation. I'm also very proud of that. And you know there are many, many more. So we've got a history of being pioneers, of doing things first and doing things new. So I'm going to now give you 5 simple ideas which I think would transform our state. They're in no particular order. And I said at the beginning of this, I'm not a politician, so I don't, it's easy for me to say these things. Ultimately, the politicians only listen to one thing, and that's the research, or you. So let me give you these. In some of them you may have heard before, but I don't think so. Certainly I think they could be done. The first one is this: the world's first. We should here in Adelaide become the world's first carbon-free city. It'd be so easy for us to do. Melbourne are actually trying to beat us to this. But you know, we have a beautiful city here, surrounded by a green curtain of parklands. Just imagine this without the pollution of diesel and petrol vehicles, particularly as we now have plenty of sun for solar energy. We've got wind, we've got electric vehicles, we've got our feet, and we've got bikes. So I think we could do this really simply if we had the will to do it. And when you do something first, the whole world comes and looks at how you did it. So it would be an incredible attraction, I think, for us to be able to say this. And no one can ever take it away from you. If you did it first, no one can ever take it away. So that's the first one. The second one is this: Kangaroo Island. I'd like to concentrate our entire promotion of tourism overseas on this, Kangaroo Island. The name is compelling. Not many people have heard of it. It's pristine environment. It's a mini Australia. It's got all our wildlife. It has the best food and wine in the world. It's got a 7-star luxury hotel resort in Southern Ocean Lodge, which I've had the privilege of staying at. And it's not cheap, but it's great. And to get there, you have to go through Adelaide. So apart from there are 2 flights a week, I think, from Melbourne in the peak season from Qantas. It obviously needs more infrastructure, but everything beautiful that nature has to provide is there. And as I said, it's a brilliant name. Now, the next one you might think is small, half an hour. How do we get people in South Australia to start work half an hour earlier? Well, we announced that on the 1st of January 2019, we're going to change the time. This might seem completely ridiculous to all of you, but believe me, it's not half as ridiculous as it is to us overseas, because why should we be half an hour behind the main business regions of Australia, Sydney and Melbourne? So I feel very strongly about this, and why should I suffer? And I've had it twice. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just landed at Adelaide International Airport. Don't forget to turn your watches back 30 years. Sorry, 30 minutes. Twice I've had that happen. Children's health will be affected. Seriously? Start schools half an hour later. I mean, curtains will fade. I can't believe it. I mean, honestly, I can't believe it. It's inexplicable to me. And people that we deal with overseas, stakeholders, are constantly trying to work out, is it forwards or backwards, or why we've got it? Do we really want to be the same as North Korea and Iran? I mean, that's what we are. You do. Okay, let's have a vote. Anyway, China is one time zone. The whole of China. Now, this one's pretty controversial because I believe that we have a responsibility. We have massive deposits in this state of uranium, at Olympic Dam at BHP, I think we should become the world's leading experts in this form of clean energy. We've conducted a Royal Commission, and that concluded that it would be a massive source of income for our state and for our economy. And I think we have a responsibility, because we have such massive deposits here, and we should change the language. It is fission power. Nuclear is like cancer or weapons and things like that. And it's not waste, it's spent fuel. And it's not a dump, it's a repository, and you should be able to retrieve it. And we should put it back in the desert, in the sand where it belonged, where it came from. And you can't have earthquakes in the sand. So that, for me, is one that I feel very strongly about. Perhaps the most controversial one is this: Adelaide versus South Australia. We are a state with 1.7 million people, roughly. About 1.5 live here in Adelaide. I wonder how many of you know the next biggest place in this state. Have a guess? Any? Mount Gambier. Do you know the population of Mount Gambier? 23,000. I mean, we are a city-state. So I think we should have a referendum and change the name of the state to Adelaide. Just like New York, New York. We'd be Adelaide, Adelaide. I would certainly be publicly executed and for suggesting something. But I think, just imagine the free publicity that you'd, not from my execution, but from the referendum. And I'm afraid I've always been a believer in the fact the only bad publicity is your obituary. So I think that's a good one. And this one I've called the Vineyard. I mean, reality television today is a fact of life. Millions and millions of people watch other people making cakes to win a cake stand. I find that extraordinary. And I'm pretty certain that they would much prefer to watch people making wine to win a vineyard. So I would like to give away a vineyard here in South Australia. Everyone knows wine comes from nice places, and we have, I think, the best wine in the world in Penfolds Grange or Hill of Grace from Henschke, and we have the best-known brand of wine in the world in Jacobs Creek. So a winning couple, it would all be filmed here in South Australia, every part of the process, in different regions and here in the city, and at the end, the winning couple would receive the keys to a vineyard and a brand of wine, and it would be a fantastic event, I think, much better than cakes, which seems to be the big thing here, and all filmed here in South Australia. So it's now, I want you to take out your smartphones. I know that Jim said please turn them off. Can we take them out? Thank you. And then can you turn them on and go to this, because I want to be a little bit democratic. Right, so if you go on to this, okay, you can vote. I think we'll call that. As it happens, I'm glad you said that, because I agree with you. If I could do one, that would be it. I was hoping, though, not to have to change my watch next time I come back here, but you know, if I was the Premier, I'd just do that straight away. It doesn't matter to you guys because you live here, but believe me, when you don't live here, it's really boring. That's basically it. But in summary, I don't want to pretend that we don't have some very serious issues facing us here in South Australia. And perhaps the most serious one I haven't talked about at all, which is our greatest export, and that's our young people. Because we have here genuinely a real world-class education system, and many of them benefit from that, but they then leave the state to either fulfill their dreams interstate or overseas, and sometimes they just don't return. And I've seen this at first hand in the UK and in New York when I was working there. So we have to create new world-class opportunities for them here in Adelaide, and hopefully it'll be Adelaide as well then. But they all have one thing in common. All of these young people have one thing in common. They all love South Australia, as I do. And that's it. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for coming as well. And we have New South Australia.
Bill, thank you so much for that insightful address and the ideas that came with it, and congratulations on the honorary doctorate.
Thank you.
I think we'll take a different tone just if we can to start off. Can you tell us some stories, Bill? What are some of the things you've done to promote, and I won't say SA, I'll say South Australia, while you've been in London?
Well, what we try and do is what I will call relevant, I'll call them stunts for want of a better word. In other words, we don't have a huge budget and I don't want to waste the state's money. So what I've done is try and identify opportunities for us to get positive PR for the state. So a good example would be something that happened, as Chris will know, the British started putting horse meat in their beef burgers. And you might think that's a funny thing to do. Well, no one died, but it was a big scandal because they wanted to know they were eating beef, not horse. And so we put an announcement on our government website that just said, if you're worried about if you're Australian or South Australian over here and you're worried about the provenance of your processed meat, contact me because our beef doesn't need any extra horsepower. And while the rest of the world is racing ahead at equine speed, you know, we in South Australia have a more laid-back approach, and we then spooked a few people. So, and of course, you know, it was wonderful. I had the High Commissioner ring me up and beg me to take it off our website, and I said, no, I'm sorry. And we were in every newspaper, we were on television, but we did other things as well. You know, a lot of young people from Britain come over here in their gap years, and we thought rather than do the usual thing of working in a pub, let's find some really unusual jobs. So we found 10 very unusual jobs: tagging great white sharks on Port Lincoln, relocating koala bears from Kangaroo Island back to the mainland, a grassless greenkeeper at Cooper Pedy. You know, that was these were real jobs. Anyway, we had a 10-minute slot on the BBC. It was a slow news week, but you got to time it right. But so those sort of things are the kind of, and we try and do 3 or 4 of those every year they don't cost us anything to do, and they focus on things that are good about this state, because we do have a lot of good things here in this state.
What does a strong state brand look like, and why is it important?
The what?
What does a strong state brand look
You mean,
like in an ideal situation?
You mean a product, or you mean here? You mean
overseas?
Oh, overseas. No, I think the brand that we have now, I think, is very strong. It's simple. You know, what I don't like is what I'll call advertising puff. You know, things that are just, you know, sort of bland, or, you know, those. I think everything should be as simple as possible. And I think now we have a brilliant state brand. But we need to be more self-confident, I think, about the way we promote ourselves and the way we think about ourselves. Because sometimes when I come back, I think it seems to me there are people here who are very negative about everything that's going on here. And I know we've just had a change of government, but you know, when you see us from afar, as I do, and you grew up here, this is a wonderful place, and it's paradise on earth. But we need to be doing new things, because the lifeblood of anything is new business, and we need to do new things.
How do local South Australian businesses take advantage of a strong state brand?
Well, I mean, consistently, you know, it's consistency. I mean, we have a number of manufacturers, particularly in the food and wine area, where we have some very strong global brands. You know, we've got, I talked about wine, obviously, and our winemakers, I think, are the most wonderful advertisement for us. Not only are they great people, but, you know, it's a real premium story for us. So, I you know, personally, I love it, but we have help from everybody, from Coopers to Villy, who makes the pies. And you know, when I started doing this job, we had a little reception at Australia House, which is the film set for Harry Potter, in the Gringo's Bank. And Mike Ram was premier, and we had about 250 people turn up, and we had 2,000 of the Villy's pies, 10 each. They all went, not one left. People were stealing them. People were stealing them. Go and have one if you haven't had one lately. They're pretty good.
At the risk of sounding like I'm doing an interview for a bad job, what are some of our weaknesses as a state?
Sorry?
What are some of our weaknesses, do you think?
I think we are a little too inward-looking. I think, a lot of our people don't sort of look out enough, and maybe that's just innate conservatism, I don't know, but I wish we would be more radical and more, I think it's in our DNA to be pioneers. I think we are people who do new things, and we're good at doing new things, and I think we need to be more confident about that and tell people.
You had that list of the 5 things that you would like to see to make 6 things, to make a new South Australia.
Yes.
What do you do if we're not doing those things and we're not taking those new steps? How do you go about selling us as a state?
Well, we have to, obviously we have to have a competitive advantage over the other jurisdictions, over the other states, because make no mistake, they are our competitors. Our enemy are the other states. I'm sorry if you're here from another state, and I know you are, but believe me, every time we do something powerful, the other guys come along and try and undermine us or pay more money. So Tour Down Under is a good example. There's also something that we're working on in London now, which is quite a big job creator, where we know that one of the other states has gone behind us to undermine us. And offer more money and offer more incentives. Now, I'm not a believer in handing out taxpayers' money to incentivize people to come here, because I think we need to create policies that give us a USP, a unique selling point, versus the other states. Obviously, I'd rather something went to Victoria than Singapore or somewhere else, some other jurisdiction. But really, make no mistake, we are competing against the other states.
As you mentioned before, we've obviously had a change of government after 16 years. You've met with the new Liberal government. What did you take to that meeting, and what's been the response?
Well, a lot of the things that I said here tonight, not all of them, because probably when the new government see that, I won't be Agent General anymore. That'll be the end of it. But no, I have found, because I've obviously worked, you've seen that I've been involved with the Conservative government in the UK, but my interest is in the States, so I am genuinely apolitical, and I have had very good cooperation. Now, sometimes it's frustrating because they're politicians, so they don't want to kind of quite step off the edge. They go to the edge, but then they don't fly. But and that's down to the way they present policies to you. But I have found, and I know you might not think this is true, that we do have a smaller government. When I say a smaller government, I mean that we in London have easy access to the ministers and the Premier. And so when I've had some issues that I have thought were destructive or bad, I've been able to ring the Premier and say, if you don't intervene here, we're going to lose this, and this is going to cost us 600 jobs or whatever. So on the whole, I think we are quicker on our feet, and I know I have an advantage over my opposite numbers from the other states in London, because they report into the bureaucracy, and I report directly to the Premier. So that, for me, is a compelling reason to be doing the job. And as I said, I don't want to maintain the status quo. I want us to be doing new things, and so those are the things I've been trying to say, I have been saying to the people I've met so far in the new government, and they've been good listeners. We'll see. If I'm still in the job next week, we'll know.
How has social media changed the role of Agent General?
It's transformed everything. The business that I started out in is dead, is finished. Traditional advertising is completely finished. I think newspapers will probably last maybe another 6 or 7 years. Television commercials that we would have grown up with of a certain generation are finished. So everything is now on social media. And the problem with social media is because it's communication is instant, it's become urgent. And of course, 99% of it isn't urgent. It's irrelevant, and it's very dangerous. But you've seen all this stuff with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, and I sat in meetings about 5 years ago and then decided that Facebook was deadly, and there was no way I was going to be on Facebook. So I'm sure some of you are, but it is a very dangerous thing.
With your experience in those political campaigns, what are your sort of broad thoughts on the Cambridge Analytica scandal and indeed the use of I-360 by the Liberal Party in the recent election?
Well, I don't think it's all come out yet. I think it's still pretty scary, and I think it's, it's used politically. I mean, we knew about it during election campaigns. I was involved in the 2015 campaign in the UK for the Conservative Party with David Cameron, and a lot of our stuff was social media. But and of course, with social media and with a smartphone, which you've all got, they know where you are. They know what you're doing, what you're looking at, what you're saying. And there's a history, there is a long history now, because this has been around for a while. So you may have done something 10 years ago with sheep up at Kapunda or something, I don't know, and you probably forgot. Anyway, it's there. So be careful. Sorry.
Right, I've gotten to this point of the interview without having a CTE, I think, so
No. Right.
I might throw it open to the audience to see if there are any questions from the floor. We do have one up the back here. Thank you. We just got a microphone coming to you now.
I'll come to you after. I had a question, Mr. Muirhead. When you met with the Premier or whoever it was you met with from the government, was there an indication from them of their support for the state brand?
Sorry, were there?
An indication from the current government of their support of the state brand?
Yes, they completely supported it.
Short and sweet, thank you. We've got another question just here.
Sorry, g'day Bill. Paul Kitching from Fuller Brand Communication. Big fan of your work and Brand South Australia. If New South Australia is the tagline, I suppose, and you've obviously brainstormed lots of great things, is there an elevator statement of such, that you can share? Well, we can brainstorm tonight, maybe?
Well, no, some of you will know, in advertising there's only 2 words that work, all right? And I wonder if you know what those 2 words are. They both have very different meanings. One of them I've used there, new works, and new has lots of different meanings. I mean, the Labour Party in the UK won 4 elections in a row off the back of that. They became New Labour. And the other word that works is free. And free has all sorts of different meanings. I mean, it's not just doesn't cost anything. It can be free to express yourself, free to, fulfill your ambitions. It has lots of different meanings. So I'm obviously deliberately simplifying things, but, I did toy with the idea about free because we were a free settlement. We were created by a British Act of Parliament in 1836. Thank you, Chris. And we didn't have any convicts. So I wondered about free, but anyway, I decided new was, I thought new was a better word to be associated with us, particularly with all the new things that are going on. And so that's where I got to with that.
Thank you. We have some, we have a question here again.
Hi, thanks very much for your presentation. Just on the world's first carbon-free city, I've actually seen that pushed out in the media a couple of times in South Australia already. So I'm just wondering, what's your connection to that? Is there a connection?
Yes,
or is
I have. I have been saying this for quite a long time. I mean, I think it was, I first started thinking about this when I started doing this job, and I came back here, and as a child growing up here, Adelaide hadn't changed that much. I mean, obviously there are things that have changed, but what did strike me was the fact that we have this wonderful layout of our city with the curtain of parklands around the CBD, and I thought it's such an obvious thing to me, it's such an obvious thing to do. We have a lot of the social issues that other jurisdictions have, so they could never do it. I mean, I know it's not easy, because when I've suggested it before, people have said, well, Australians are the biggest car users in the world. Did you know that? And I said, yes, I did. And I know Holden were manufacturing here. Well, they're not anymore. But, the other thing that I thought about was, they then said to me, within Australia, the biggest car users in Australia are South Australians. So for every man, woman and child in this state, there are 3 cars. Now, I found that staggering. Whether it's true or not, that's what I was told.
We've got another question over here. Yes, sir.
Okay, good evening, Bill. It was interesting you brought up the issue of, or the fact that we've got 3 cars per person in Adelaide. So there's a group of us that's working on the idea of overtaking old, boring Melbourne with our old Formula One petrol racing and bringing the 21st century version of Formula E racing, all electric, new, high technology. What do you think of that as for the brand of South Australia, and can you help us in any, and can you help us?
No, it's right in our DNA, obviously. I think I said to you the other night, I think the issue is, you know, if we were to do that, it's ideal for this city because, you know, we do events extremely well, so I've no doubt we would do that very well. I mean, the issue is, you know, making it as attractive for the world as possible, because in the end, those are things that showcase our city.
Okay, we had a question from the lady here.
As an ambassador for one of, I'm over here, sorry, for one of the parklands near my home, can my first question be to ask you to talk to the new government about not developing on the parklands? That's just an aside to my real question, which is, could you expand a bit on the effects of Brexit for South Australia, both advantages and disadvantages as you see them?
Well, I mean, I think it's an opportunity. Brexit is obviously an incredibly, you know, I said it's an incredibly complex and actually a very divisive thing, I think, in the UK. You know, I've lived in the UK for a long time, and I know it's friends have fallen out with each other quite seriously, and it's different things in different parts of the country, and it's cross-party, so it's not... I think it could well end up being so complicated that it ends up getting moved and postponed and tangled up with other things. But in terms of us and the opportunity for us, I think it's a great opportunity because our High Commissioner, who also happens to be a South Australian, has been very vocal about those opportunities in terms of free trade and opportunities. I'm sure Chris will vouch for this, that if our exporters are mindful to get out there, I think it's an open door. One of the issues, I mean, obviously the tariffs are still very high, so we need some sort of agreement that brings that down. I mean, make no mistake, Britain stabbed us in the back when they went in. You know, we fought in 2 world wars on their side. Overnight, they stabbed us in the back. My father was head of the Australian Meat Board at the time. A lot of farmers here committed suicide. And, you know, but we've got over that. You know, we've moved on. Things have changed. My view is that, you know, Britain should have remained in the EU, and I'm not ashamed to say that. And I'm at odds with other people about that who think, you know, they wanted to stay. I think it's not over yet, but I still think all the publicity around it, because a lot of people have tried to liken the Commonwealth with the EU, you know, people in Europe. I mean, I had a meeting with the French government in Brittany who said the reason Britain voted to leave the EU because they hate the French. And I said, well, that's true, but I don't think that's why they voted to leave the EU. So, no, I think certainly in premium produce we have a big opportunity, and we just need to be a bit more confident about it.
Okay, we had a question from the gentleman here at the front.
Good evening, Bill. And continuing great respect for your work and your contribution to South Australia. About 14 years ago, when I commenced as the head of Arts SA for Mike Rann, I went to a Cultural Ministers' Council meeting, and during the dinner, my counterpart in Victoria said to me, after several glasses of good South Australian red, now, Greg, let me tell you how it is. Adelaide innovates and the rest of us imitate. But we will always, as you said, outspend you and get there eventually and overtake us. It gives me pause, though, to look at our graphic device and wonder whether there's room in that white space for a similar scaled block of the numeral 1.
Of what?
Of the numeral 1.
Oh, yes. No. No, that's not a bad idea, yeah. Oh, I thought you were going to say Tasmania. They got pretty pissed off when we did it, didn't they?
There is a young lady up the back of the room who's been very patient with her arm in the air. If we could get a microphone to her. Thank you.
Bill, thank you for your presentation. Absolutely fabulous. I am new to South Australia, came here 4 years ago. I love this place. I think it's the best kept secret. But I'm amazed, like you, South Australians don't seem to get behind when I get so enthusiastic. And they look at me like I'm stupid. And I just think it's amazing. The energy in this place is extraordinary, but the people in general don't get behind that same energy because they don't know what they've got. That's an outsider coming to live here that says this is a fantastic place.
Yep.
We'll take that as a statement. We do have to wrap up shortly, so we've got time for 2 more questions. If I could just have the lady here, just on the edge there. Thanks.
I'm rural and proud, and I can't believe that you're saying that we're Adelaide, not South Australia, when most of our wheat barley comes from the country, our meat products come from the country, our fish come from the country, and they are the major generators of income. Even though we have the creative industries in Adelaide, the medical sciences, the university city that we are, and the creative arts that we are, but country proud.
Bill, we've still got time for that public execution.
All right.
If you've got
Well, that's a view.
moments.
That's a view. Good.
We'll take that as a statement again. Do we have sorry, the young lady in the middle here has been...
Here.
Hi, Chloe Benton from the global education group Navitas. Should we be known as the education state, or is that not new and not free?
I think we are. I mean, we use, and you know, the fact that this is happening at this university, we use our world-class universities and education system very much as part of the sell. Because if a company is looking to come here and invest here, the first thing that happens is they you know, where are our kids going to go to school? Where are we going to live? And you know, what's going to happen? And then and we have a great story here because we've got such a great system. So we use it very much. And then this university in particular is very proactive in working with us on that front to bring investment, to bring jobs, and to bring people. Because you know, I have only one mission in life, which is to create jobs here. So every morning when I go into the office with our little team, how many jobs have we created today? You know, I've tried to structure our office as though it was a company. I don't want us to be afraid to have ideas or to make mistakes, because you can't do new things without making mistakes, as long as you don't make a lot of mistakes. But if you've done something wrong, then change it and do something else. Get on a horse and ride it if it's the one you don't like. Okay?
Bill, thank you so much for speaking with us. I'm sure we could stay here all night, and I'm sure you'll be accosted after we release you from here. But thank you very much for your thoughts and insights. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me in thanking Bill Muirhead, Agent General of South Australia.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you very much for this evening. And I hope everybody learned something tonight, even if it was just free or new, for that matter. I certainly did. So Jessica, thank you for doing the interview, the evening with Bill. Bill, thank you for your thoughts. I'd also like to thank Jacinta Thompson, who's the Executive Director of the Hawke Institute, who, as you know, puts these things on and is our major outreach centre from the university into the community. This will be on the website next week, Bill's talk and the interaction. So thank you all for coming out tonight, and what's a beautiful evening. So you could have been sitting out in the backyard having a glass of red, and instead you've come here to listen to Bill, which is a test to his drawing power. So once again, thank you all, and thank you, Bill, for this evening.